Today's Gospel begins with Jesus teaching the crowd. As often happens, he's asked an unrelated question about something that's clearly playing on their minds. Two natural disasters had recently rattled the local townspeople. The phrase natural disaster is intriguing. St. Luke seems to be asking, what's natural about natural disasters? Does God send them for some divine reason? Or are they random, haphazard events? How, if at all, does God engage in what's going on among us? Like all good theologians, St. Luke starts theologising by ascertaining the facts. While it may not be his own experience, it is the experience of Galileans whose religious beliefs and practices have been seriously violated. That experience sees at least the questioner asking the right questions, seeking to better understand what their beliefs and practices mean. The second incident that questions the people is the day that 18 people are killed by the collapse of a tower at Siloam. How is God either involved or not involved in these events? And like a wily Irishman, St. Luke answers this key question by asking a further question. Do you think that because these Galileans suffer in this way, they are worse sinners than other Galileans? St. Luke treats the two tales of woe as an object lesson, warning, unless you repent, you'll all perish just as they did. Yet it seems that St. Luke isn't entirely happy with such a conclusion, so he adds a parable to confuse us. Far from being malicious, Jesus clearly appreciates that confusion is often the beginning of learning. A parable turns our world upside down, proposing a very different way of looking at life and living it credibly. However, this parable sounds so straightforward. It can easily be a morality tale peppered with shoulds and oughts and musts, rather than being a perplexing parable. While a parable flips our world like a pancake, a moral reading of the text argues whether a flipping pancake ought to be part of your diet anyway. These are words that keep the fingers wagging. And well might we ask ourselves, what on earth is Luke getting at? His story has a gardener dig and manure and water a fig tree in a vineyard. Now, what gardener in their right mind would ever do that? Surely he'd know that the roots of fig trees spread far from the trunk, invading a vine's space. India's banyan tree is part of the big fig family. Its roots spread as far and as broadly as the height of the tree, keeping grapes in the shade when they most need the sun. Who, as a gardener, would persist for yet another year? You don't need to be Albert Einstein, but it helps to know that frustration lurks close by those who do the same thing over and over and expect different results. It could be called the parable of the inexperienced would-be gardener. Naive would be a better description. He's willing to tend the fig tree for yet one more year, hoping to get a bumper crop. But this hope is obviously doomed from the start. Now the question becomes, given these gardening tips, how is the story parabling us? What do you make of the parable? Does it suggest that when God engages the world, it may not always coincide with how we would have God act? The truth is, God sees through eyes filled with compassion and fresh beginnings. God can even draw goodness out of what may seem to be the least productive of circumstances.